Today is the 16th day of Shvat, the 14th of January, and so we asked the question yesterday. Really? Okay, sorry. It's the 16th. It's 14th of February. Okay, I guess I can't even say 14th of February. I have a problem with it. In any case, secret problem. In any case, so we asked the question yesterday. So why do we need why is it called the basin? What are we elevating here? I mean, the whole point was that that they're ordained, right? So we're elevating the new moon, we're elevating the feminine, but on the other hand, they're ordained, and so the ordained is the opposite. It's it's Abba. It's coming down. It's the right side. So how do you get this mix here? So this is a mix in general in the basin. It's a problem about the Sanhedrin in general. That what's their duty? Is there a duty to have compassion, to have mercy, or is there a duty to fix? To elevate is to fix something. Is to bring it back to its original state. So when you administer judgment, the thinking needs to be that I'm fixing something. On the other hand, you come and you say you should have compassion. But if you have compassion, you can't fix. Like a doctor who has compassion can't cut, can't surgeon can't do anything. They won't be able to heal. So what do you do? So he says that really it is a mixture here, and he brings us that there is actually a dispute between the Kabbalists. What is wisdom? Is it judgment, or is it mercy? Is it love, loving kindness? That's interesting, but it's very easy, right? Why would we say that wisdom is might? Because wisdom is what clarifies things. It's called kulam b'chokhmah etbariru. Everything is clarified through wisdom. So wisdom cuts away what's not relevant. For that, you definitely need to have might. On the other hand, it's on the right side. We know that it's on the right side. Now, we know that it's on the right side. You have to understand that Kabbalah developed. There was no clear tree of life of the Sfirot, where you have wisdom on the right and understanding on the left. 1,500 years ago, it wasn't clear at all. It was almost like their thinking also wasn't so structured. They didn't think in structures. What they thought in, well, they had some structures, but what they really thought in was whatever they were looking at, they analyzed as far as they could, and they didn't necessarily think about what we call a coherence theory of truth. Because today there's something called coherence theory of truth, which says, how do I know if something's true or not? Well, it has to fit everything else I know. So they didn't necessarily try to create a coherent picture of everything they knew. So in some places in the Torah, it came out that wisdom was judgment, and other places in the Torah it came out that wisdom was loving kindness. So the Chayat of Yehuda ibn Chayat, or Yehuda Chayat, he's one of the famous book called Sefer HaMalchus, there's other books of his. He wrote that Chochma Idin, that wisdom is judgment. Sh'ar HaMekubalim, says Ramosha Cordovero, they write that it's loving kindness, it's chesed. So what do you do when you have this kind of dispute? So again, if you understand that each one is looking at something, so to make it coherent, you have to include both. So that's what the Arizal did. So before the Arizal, there was no coherent picture of what to do with this. And the Arizal brought out a picture that brought them both into the fold, as it were. They work together. They're both true. The fact that wisdom is judgment, that's a particular type of wisdom. Which wisdom? That is the wisdom of the crown. The wisdom in the crown is called chokhmah stima. It's called the concealed wisdom, or the hidden wisdom. And id is a type of judgment. Why? Because in the crown is the most complex of all the sfirot. And in the crown there's a top part and the lower part, two partsufim, two personas. And the top part is called Atik, the lower part is called Arich. And then Atik goes into Arich, but it only goes partially into it. Only its lower 7 sfirot of Atik, the top part, goes into Arich. It's a very important part.
Stima, is it more blocked? You know,
you could say
it's a different kind of a thing. It's like a blocked.
It's blocked from consciousness. That's what it means. We're not conscious of it.
Okay.
It's where all our talents come from. Okay. So the person is not aware of his talents before he starts developing them.
Yeah, right.
You have to do something, and it begins. And the description is it's like a drip from a faucet that's leaking. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. If it gushes out, the person will lose his exactly. He'll lose his sanity.
Yeah, right.
Won't be able to handle it. No. So it's one of the things that we have, that there's if you're healthy, it drips slowly. And that's a good part about talent.
It drips too slow.
Sometimes it's too slow. If it's too slow, it means that the person doesn't have enough nullification. Nullification is what opens the faucet a little bit to get. So nullification says, let's say if your talent is musical, so it's the hours that you spend doing bars, hours and hours. Yeah, there's a lot of nullification before it. If you don't have that, then it really drips very slowly, if at all. Yeah. Sometimes it won't even appear.
Yes.
Okay. So we said that the top part goes into the bottom part, but only the 7 lower sfirot, from Chesed and down. So the Gvura of Atik goes into the wisdom the Gvura of Atik goes into the wisdom of Arich. So in it, there is Gvura. Inside the wisdom of the crown, there is a Gvura that came from Atik, from the higher persona. So he says that's to understand all this. These were the parts of the Zohar that were the hardest to understand. The Idra, in this case, was the Idra Zuta, that the Arizal was pretty much the first one to write a commentary on them, but he didn't really write on them. He wrote next to them. He didn't explain the text itself, even though we have some writings from him himself, but he didn't necessarily explain it word for word. But he studied this very much in depth, and he was the first one to come out with a model from what was being said there. Very, very difficult passages, but they're the most descriptive. There are also the Idra Zuta, the Idra Rabbah, Sifra Ditzniuta, all these things. They're like the early Kabbalistic texts. They're certainly from the time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Everything after that could be discussions that were rewritten, or what stuff was done to them. But these parts of the Zohar, they're very, very ancient, and nobody could really put their head around it. They tried. There was all kinds of attempts. The Arizal was the first one to really explain them. Moses Cordovero, who was the greatest Kabbalist before him, in the generation before him, was also, he considered him his teacher. He tried to write a commentary on them, but he never finished, and never worked out. So in his great elucidation of the Zohar, which is called Or Yakar, he skips over these parts of the Zohar. So the Arizal was really the first one to build a system based on this, to make it coherent. So he says what Rabbi Yehuda Chayat means. Again, where did he get this from? He didn't necessarily get it from the Idra, from the same place as the Arizal. He saw it in different issues that the Zohar brought up in different places, or even in the sages themselves, that there's an aspect of wisdom that is very judgmental, very, very strong in judgment and might. So the Arizal says, yes, that is how the Chokhmah Stima is. That's how the concealed wisdom of the crown is. V'lefichach nikra din, and therefore we call it judgment. Aval chokhmah da'atzilut, but the wisdom within the world of Atzilut, which is already lower. The way you have to think about this here is to understand that whenever we say crown, another way of saying crown is saying Adam Kadamon, primordial man. And then Atzilus is underneath it. So Atzilus is already the world of faith, let's call it, of a regular human being. It's within our consciousness. So there, in our consciousness, wisdom is loving kindness. It is already not like it was judgment above, but rather it becomes the top of the right axis. Now this is a very important point, that in Ak, in primordial man, there are no three axes. The sfirot in the crown in primordial man, they're not aligned according to three axes. They're one on top of the other. So that also explains why in the crown it could be something completely different. It could be might. It's like saying that the beginning of the revelation of wisdom in the super consciousness, before I'm conscious of it, is a lot of might, and it needs it in order to penetrate into reality. Once it penetrates into my reality, which is Atzilus, which is the world of emanation, so there it's already the top of the right axis. It begins to bring out loving kindness. So this in and of itself is a huge thing. What does this mean? So the next section is about trying to make sense of this in terms of psychology. So let's see. Says the wisdom. I'm sorry, I didn't read it right. It didn't make sense to me. The wisdom in the crown, wisdom of this arich anpin, this mochastima, this chochmastima, this concealed wisdom, is known. There's another article in the Zohar called Ma'amar Kavamida. It's at the very, very end of the Zohar. It's called the line of measurement. Basically a ruler, if you want. It's like you have to measure stuff, so you need a ruler. Limdod shefa or deketer alyon she'en imshach b'mida b'gvul l'mi she'rui v'lo l'mi she'eno rui. So he says the primary form of wisdom is to measure. What are we measuring? Whether the light, meaning the revelation of Hashem, should come down in a certain place or not. So what is wisdom going to be measuring? It's going to be measuring how much is this a vessel, this place, for God's revelation to come down. So that's wisdom in the crown. So wisdom in the crown is judging all the time. To measure is like to judge. It's like to say, is this relevant or not relevant? So it's very interesting. You could say that in previous generations, the whole of Kabbalah, and especially Chassidus even, was, sorry, I shouldn't have said especially Chassidus, but especially Kabbalah, was considered to be Chokhmah Nistara. It's called Chokhmat Chen, they called it. The wisdom of Chen. And Chen was Chokhmah Nistara, hidden wisdom. And there you see that they have all these tests about whether someone is ready to is someone who's worthy of studying this type of wisdom. All kinds of tests they had. The age wasn't one of them. Age is a non-starter even, because so many of the biggest Kabbalists were, they died before the age that people say today. So it's nonsense. The age thing is much, much later. People brought it out much later, and it's not relevant to anything. But they had all these, like, is he God-fearing? How does he act? Is he a tzaddik? Many, many, many tests. And then, even then, when they sat before someone and he was teaching, it would be a long process of trying to understand what he was doing with it. And if they felt at any stage that this person's is not honest or is not candid, so they would push him out. So that was the Kabbalah of the world of Ak, of the crown, where there's judgment. Wisdom is related to judgment. I can't give you the wisdom unless I can judge you to be a worthy vessel. But then, in terms of history, we're now in the world of Atzilus. We're now like in the world of emanation. And in the world of emanation, it's completely different. I need to give you the wisdom in order to give you loving kindness, to give you love. It's a completely different picture of wisdom. So wisdom used to be, and this is true about the whole ancient world. In the ancient world, all of wisdom was concealed. It wasn't just by us, it was by everyone. And you had to prove yourself to be worthy of receiving the knowledge. Once you proved yourself, they gave it to you. But in our world, it's exactly the opposite. If you don't have wisdom, it's like you don't have love in your life. Nobody loves you. It's completely the opposite. You need the wisdom in order to survive. It's something completely different. So it's like the movement from the world of primordial man down to the world of emanation. It's like we're living in the wisdom of the world of emanation. He says, in general, crown, Arichanpin also, is actually beyond all the differences between light and dark, and between somebody who's worthy and not worthy. The crown itself, it administers equally to everyone. So so that's the crown. You can say that's the Galgalta, that's the crown of the crown. But the Mochastima, but the Galgalta means the skull. But the Mochastima, you called it like the sealed in brain, right? In the same way that the brain is inside the skull, you can't see it. So on the face of it, the crown was administering equally to everyone. That's the symbol of the skull. It's called, everybody is the same. And inside there's a brain, and the brain says, no, that you have to differentiate. So that's why it's called mochastima, because it's not the initial interaction with the crown. The initial interaction with the crown that the people have is that the crown feels everybody's equal, everybody's the same. But the wisdom in it is something entirely different. אבל על ידי החוכמה, כשבא לדון הדבר בשכל, ימצא טעם ודעת שאין מראוי להיטיב למי שמעשיו אינן רצויים. But he says, so even though the skull is like, again, the symbol of the crown giving to everyone equally, the mind inside, the concealed wisdom inside, says, no, there's measurement. That's why they call it the beginning of measurement. And he begins to ask, is this person worthy or not? ואם יעמיק בשכלו ימצא גם במי שראוי לכך איזה שם פסול. הרי השכל הוא בחינת דין וצמצום. But really, the problem here is that if you start exercising judgment, you'll find that nobody's really worthy of the wisdom. He says that's a problem with the mochastima. The mochastima is such a, again, that's what holds our talents in place. Because if it wasn't so sealed, then again we'd be overwhelmed. So there has to be very harsh judgment here about whether you're ready for it or not. One of the worst things that people have is that their talent seeps in before they're ready for it. And then really, even if they don't go crazy, it derails them. A lot of people can't find the right vessel for their talents, and then they lose them. So it means that most of the people in the world are much more talented than they think they are. The problem is they haven't found the right vessel. When you find the right vessel, or when you have enough of an ability to build, again, this is called tzadikut. Tzadikut, to be righteous, in Torah means that you perform mitzvos. So in the regular world, this means that you find the right vessel to live with. Because mitzvos are all about how you live your life. So if you can't find the right vessel, in music or in acting or whatever it is, then the talent remains hidden, because it's like a judgment that says he's not ready. Even though it might really be this person's almost like his gift from God that he was supposed to take. But he didn't, so it's holding him back so that he doesn't fall apart.
And that's where we get into, is it mean Shemaim that's being held back?
Right.
For another generation. Do you understand?
It's still there, right? It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere, but it may not want to, in other words, the Eibusher might not want it revealed at that point.
Again, you have to
I'm
push.
personalizing something.
I know.
Yeah.
You have to push hard to get it. If you haven't, that's what Chazal say, Yagati velo matzati al ta'amin. If you've toiled and you haven't found, don't believe. What do you mean, toiled? I've toiled to create a vessel, and I haven't found the talent yet, so don't believe.
What if it's on the other side? What if the talent is there and you've never found the...
Same thing. Then it just overwhelms you, and you're not able to function properly.
You don't succeed.
Right? There's no success in it.
That might be...
It's not a blessing; it becomes a curse.
But you say it's a curse?
It could become a curse. It could be something that
curse,
derails the person.
When you look at the overall picture of generations, that might have been... Do you understand? It becomes relative to a certain point. In other words, if my father had succeeded, I may not have.
Right? Could be.
So do you get? Do you
No,
get? That's what I'm
but
saying.
the
I'm
crown is
personalizing.
infinite. If it's something, there's this whole thing that.
I mean, we have to look at across, not just our lives. I mean, we look at it as a claw. I mean, this is. Do
Well,
kind
if
of
you
get
want to
what
look at it as a cloud, then all of Am Yisrael, the whole Jewish people, our talent is faith. So if you find that there's a generation where faith is concealed,
Yes.
so you know that we haven't found the right vessel. That generation didn't have the right vessel. Like now, our faith, in my opinion, is very, very close to being lost if we don't build a temple. If we don't appoint a king. Okay, if we don't appoint a king. Because that's the vessel. And if you miss the timing also, it'll wait for the next generation, but this generation will. Okay. That's the feeling. That's the feeling. The feeling is that the vessel today is not wide enough. The state of Israel is not a vessel for anything almost.
That was his. You encapsulized.
Yeah.
He's been on my mind, as you know. And
Okay, so we'll continue next week.